When you have a party, hope you're happy.
Hi, this is Albert, and you're watching Albert's Adventures Part 3. This is Episode 3, and my guest today is Doug, I forgot your last name.
Wilkes.
Doug Wilkes. And Doug is a member of our Freedom Cell group, and we've been out here working on the community garden all day. He's set aside some of his land for us to set up a community garden, and we're going to grow a bunch of food. And we don't really know much about growing food, but Doug does, and so he's going to show us how to do it and help us, and we're really excited about that. And so I'm going to interview Doug. And Doug, before we get started, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell us like how you ended up here and maybe a little bit about your philosophy?
Sure. How I ended up out here. Well, I grew up when I was younger on a hog farm up in Northern California. And while I hated that when I was doing it, because there were no friends and I was in the middle of nowhere and I had to work and all the reasons a teenager would not want to be on a farm I had. Afterwards, I kind of always had this nagging desire to be back out there. Just wasn't ever practical, and it turns out that it not being practical was me. I liken it to people that say, we're waiting to have a child until we're ready. Right? You're never ever going to be ready. You're never ever going to be, this enough or that enough or those enough. So, ended up, meeting my wife and moving to North Carolina and living in Charlotte, and it just got, it started off, about 10 years ago, I think, when I came here. Charlotte was kind of a big town, not a small city, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and it became pretty evident that neither one of us wanted to live there anymore, and so off to the country we went. And so that's how we got out here. We just made the change to come out here. A lot of it is just, it's an interesting thing. I'm not a prepper so much as I like to be prepared, but I don't go over the top on it. But I get a little freaked out with too many people. If that makes sense, right? And I don't mean like in a group of people that, I'm hanging out with, right? Because that doesn't bother me at all. But when I drive into the city or something like that, I start to feel very anxious, and I don't feel comfortable. I feel stressed, anxious, and a little bit concerned, right? Just because those are centers of violence and activity. So we came out here and started living this life, and here we are.
Has it always been like that you felt anxious in the city, or is it just since you've been living out here?
It has, actually, which is something I never really noticed. I managed to kind of push it down. It was something that I lived with, but I never really liked. And as I look back at the times when I was living in, dense suburbs or, near, very close to cities or urban centers, I look back at those times and I spent far less time outside than I do now. Now, obviously, I've got to take care of the farm, but even still, I make time to go outside here because I enjoy it. It's peaceful. It's everything else. I always had this kind of anxiety about doing that when I was living in more suburban or urban centers. So I managed to trick myself into thinking that it wasn't there, I suppose, right? Which is interesting. So I must have been at just a heightened level of stress for quite some time.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same for me. I'm used to living in the city, and that's where I live now. But I've noticed that when I go out in the woods or into the mountains or the ocean, and I'm just out there by myself, I feel definitely a different feeling, a lot more peaceful and just a lot more in touch with the earth and with nature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, when we do go into Charlotte, which is pretty rare, as we're going into Charlotte, the further away from here, or the closer we get to urban centers, I can start feeling like the pulse in my neck harder, and then I start getting kind of stress headaches, which I think is probably my body's physiological reaction to stress, in that my blood pressure is starting to ramp up. You know, when you're in a tense situation, you can feel that throbbing almost. I feel like that. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then when we come back, I feel it gradually lighten all the way up until we turn off, and all of a sudden it's just wide open. And then I can almost feel it wash over my body. Like the stress and everything starts leaving. Like, okay, I'm okay now. Which is a very weird thing. I never paid much attention to it. And I've heard it from many people, especially after they come out here and spend any appreciable amount of time.
Do you think all of the radiation in the city has anything to do with it? The cell towers and all the other radiation that's present in the city?
I think there's probably something to that, yes. I haven't really given a whole lot of thought about it, but certainly, yeah, power lines, cellular antennas, Wi-Fi signals. You go to Charlotte, you could probably sit there and, and sit in your car and connect to, 40, 50 different Wi-Fi just sitting in one location. So, yeah, there's probably a good deal of it that comes from that externality. For me, it's just the idea that now I feel like when I'm in an environment like that, I feel like I have to be far more alert, if that makes sense. Like, I'm alert, I'm aware of my surroundings out here, but, it's not like there's cars constantly going by and helicopters flying overhead and, people getting in and out of vehicles or houses or buildings, etc. And each one of those opportunities to me presents a potential interaction that could be less than desirable, right? Not that I want that to happen, but that's what happens when, violence is committed, right? In any shape. So, it's weird. I'm a little interesting in that realm, I guess. I think that's a bigger piece of it for me. And I feel closed in. I feel like if there were ever a situation where I had to get to safety, away from crowds, I almost feel like that's almost an impossible thing to do in a city. It's just too easy to block you in and to force you into a situation where you would have to be on foot.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy and the rules that you live by?
Sure. My philosophy is pretty simple. I believe in freedom. I am a self-identified anarchist. There's a lot of different spectrums in anarchy. I kind of basically consider myself an individualist, and not of the Ayn Rand variety so much, although there's some good stuff in her work. But I believe that I want to live my life where I am not taking away from everything and everyone around me, but rather putting into and making better the things around me, whether that's my relationships and interactions with people, or it's my interaction with the land, or my interactions with animals, right? I kind of live my life as much as possible. Obviously, I still live inside of the system, right? We all live in the matrix. I try and live my life as much as possible, to the extent that for me, as long as I'm not, and nobody, I'm not, I want to live free, right? So the idea is I live my life, I do what I want. As some people have put it, you just want to do whatever the F you want. Well, yeah, I do. I want to be a free human that can do what they want when they want, as long as I'm not infringing on another person's right to live in the same manner, or causing harm to come to another person, right?
So would you say you're kind of like a constitutional anarchist? You want to have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and let everybody else have the same?
No. Yes and no. I think the premise of it, sure, yes. I think the Constitution is essentially I would be happy to use it to wipe my butt after defecating. Let's put it that way. I think that's what it's about worth at this point. Other than historical, right? I think there's some historical significance to it. I do think that there was some benefit to the Constitution as it was framed, and I think the ideas there were fairly decent. But I mean, keep in mind, even at that time, there was a lot of resistance to creating a Constitution, because those framers, founders, whatever you want to call them, envisioned what we're living through today, or at least in some capacity that. And they felt that the Constitution would put too many limits on limits. I think it could have been written a lot more simply. I think it could have been a pretty two-line statement, possibly. Live your life as a free man, do what you will, don't infringe on other people's abilities to live free as they see fit, and do no harm.
Now, when you talk about being an anarchist, I think for a lot of people that brings up a kind of false picture of someone, throwing bombs, like the people last summer that were burning down buildings, and on the media they're saying, oh, these anarchists are burning down buildings or whatever.
Yes.
That doesn't have anything to do with the anarchism, does it?
Not in the slightest. Not at all. Those are black bloc people. That's what we refer to them as. And in the more Soviet terminology, right, with BLOC being, but those are the people that are the antithesis of anarchy. The anarchy is not about that at all. In fact, anarchy is simply, it's the conglomeration of two Latin words: without rulers. Anarchy. Okay, an is the not having something, and archy was leadership or rulership. So that's what anarchy is. The vast majority of anarchists believe pretty much the same as me. There are different thoughts. A lot of them center around economics, to be honest. It's the weirdest thing, but they do. They center around economics. Anarchists are peaceful people. They're not looking to blow things up. They don't want to shoot people. They don't want to hurt people. They just want to be left alone and allowed to live their life as they see fit. Again, as long as they're not infringing on someone else's right to do the same, and they're not doing harm to others.
So is it basically the idea that nobody has a right to commit violence?
That's it. So here's the thing, right? I mean, and people argue for the existence of law enforcement. They argue for the existence of government, etc. I don't believe that I can give a right to someone else that I myself cannot have. Mm-hmm. There is no situation where I can go commit an act of violence on someone else and it's considered okay, right? And I'm not saying self-defense. That's a completely different thing. I'm saying I'm going to go commit an act of violence. I'm going to stop you from whatever you're doing, and if you resist, I'm going to club you, and I'm going to put you in shackles, and I will kidnap you, and I'll put you in a cage. If I do that, I will be going in that same cage for a very long time, because I don't have that right. I don't believe that I can legislate that right to someone who yesterday, before their pseudo-religious ceremony, could not have that right. And all of a sudden, boom, now they do, because they did a pseudo-religious ceremony after being the winner of a popularity contest. It's just exactly what it is.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds awfully reasonable.
It really is. The problem is that a lot of people really have this deep-rooted need, and they don't see it, to be taken care of. They feel like the only way to be taken care of is to have this entity sitting over them, governing their lives. And what they don't understand is that there are plenty of examples in the world today. Not as many, because government doesn't like competition, But there are plenty of examples today where people are living just like that, and throughout history there have been tons of examples. The Iroquois Nation was a prime example of what an anarchist community could look like, right? It's it's interesting, and when you attack that need, attack's a bad word, when you debate that need, if you aren't able to talk to them in their language, right? In other words, we need this, we have to have this, right? We have to have borders, because otherwise we'll be invaded. We have to have a military, or another country will come and invade us. And if you can't talk to them in that language, and I can't, well, I can, but I talk to them in the liberty language, then they automatically think that you're the worst thing that has ever happened. There's this divisiveness between the Reds and the Blues, right? That tribe and this tribe, and they know how to talk within their own circles, and they know how to counter the other side, the other tribe, with talk tracks that they've been told work, and they do largely. And the same goes in the opposite. And when you come in and you go, yeah, I agree with that, but you didn't go far enough. Yeah, I agree with that, but you didn't go far enough. And they each look at you and go, well, you're one of them. No, I'm not. No, you're one of them. No, I'm not. I'm an anarchist. And they're like, gasp! You don't buy into the system at all? Now we know who the real enemy is. And it's like, I don't need your system. Historically, communities have come together to help each other out. So there's no need for people to be robbed essentially at gunpoint, or the threat of violence, and that's a reality, to take care of people that live thousands of miles away from them. People don't need, to be robbed to have health care. People don't need to be robbed to create flat things that we drive on. People in communities have historically come together and helped each other out. When we have out here had multiple circumstances where someone posts, on the Nextdoor app, I use that for community stuff, or we hear about it from one of our friends that are local. This community comes together and helps. A grocery trip. Let me give you some of my eggs or some produce from my garden. You can do this, but you can't get out of bed. Well, let me go ahead and take a list from you, and I'll go shopping for you, right? And we do this, right? So the idea that people won't help each other out without big daddy government doesn't fly.
How do you respond to people who say that, well, if we had an anarchist system here in the U.S., then China or Russia would just come and take us over?
I don't think any nation state today really has any real desire to take over another nation, whether it has a strong military or not. I think there are plenty of countries right now that, if that were the case, they would be wiped off the map. Right? Some of them purposefully without armies. I mean, nobody's gone and taken over New Zealand. Why not? It's ripe for the picking. No military there, nothing appreciable. Why weren't they? I mean, can you?
Well, I think someone who is arguing this would say that because they're protected by the U.S.
That's also okay. I mean, sure, maybe. The other piece of that is, in an anarchist society, there would be no limits on the ownership of what you can own. I could have a couple tanks out here, and F-16 fighter jet if I knew how to fly the dang thing, an Apache helicopter, Hellfire missiles, some SAMs if I wanted to. Right? So that's the other piece. Just because there's no military doesn't mean there's not a large body of armed individuals, and individuals that have true personal liberty. So the idea of taking away true personal liberty from someone will invoke a reaction that is not going to go too well. We also have one good benefit that, depending on where you sit, but I see it as a benefit, is that the majority of the citizens in the United States, continental United States at least, own guns, and a lot of them. And there's more actual firearm owners here than there are in all of the combined standing armies in the world. That's numbers you don't go after. Afghanistan, Russia has been was dropping bombs and attack helicopters and troops for decades, and they didn't get anywhere. So we came in and decided we're going to do it now, right? After we fought off the Russians by training terrorists to do this, now we're bombing the terrorists because now they're bad. They stole our freedoms from us. And what? How did my freedom get in Afghanistan? I don't know, but I don't know, whatever. And, they've been successful doing so, hiding in caves, mud huts with AK-47s. It doesn't take much to survive. It takes far more to occupy, invade, and conquer a location, even if you have the desire and the will to do it. Vietnam, another perfect example of this, right? A people that don't want to be invaded and occupied by some other country, you're going to have a real hard time doing it unless you just completely glass the place over and then come back in 50 years when it's habitable again.
So I guess in an anarchist system, you'd almost have kind of the militia that they talk about in the Second Amendment, of people that are just defending their freedom from outside invaders. Exactly.
And the idea of anarchy, depending on which tenet you're looking at, right? Because it does have a wide range, but the real idea of anarchy, whether you look at it from occupation and use or you look at it from property rights, etc., whatever, doesn't matter. That's just a point of contention and an argumentation thing. Is that, the only border I have any right to is the one on my property. That's my property, right?
Uh-huh.
Other than that, I don't have, So who cares? I mean, if a billion Chinese people want to move and come on over here, okay, so if you want to start a government, now we're going to have a problem. But, if you want to start a government for yourselves and allocate a piece in an area and you want to live there and live under that, go for it, as long as nobody else is already living there. And you can't force other people into it. Because that would be doing harm or taking away liberty, which could invoke a reaction of self-defense.
And in an anarchist society, how would you deal with things like traffic accidents? Say somebody runs into your car. What do you do if there's no police and no central authority to help solve the problem?
It's a very interesting one, and it's a very common one, actually. So, just because we say no rulers does not necessarily mean that there won't be any rules, if you want to say that. Again, right, I can live my life and do what I want. In this circumstance, the majority of accidents I've been in, with the exception of one, were solved between me and the other driver. So I didn't need anyone. I could have called someone and done all that, but I didn't need to. Two rational people were able to talk things through and figure out something that worked for both people. So in the case of that, you have privatized things like arbitration. Right? You can go to arbitration. You have privatized defense if you want that. You could have privatized law enforcement if you felt that was necessary, but it would be more like security, not law enforcement, right? There wouldn't be laws. There might be guidelines and rules, right? But they're more along the lines of common sense. You wouldn't go over your some person's home, walk in the door and start chewing on their food, right? Well, okay, do you need a law to tell you that that's not the right thing to be doing? No. Does a law stop someone that wants to do that from doing it? No. So, privatize.
Yeah, and I guess maybe you could have something like no-fault insurance, which some states even have under our system, where if your car gets ran into, you just call your insurance company and...
It's a private interaction, right? I could choose to have it, I could choose not to. Either way, I've got to make the other person whole. So there's a number of ways you could handle that. I think it would depend on the community you lived in. I think it would depend on where you were, a number of things. If it were you and I'd probably just be like, all right, well, this is a bummer. Maybe it's cosmetic, and I just go, oh, it's fine, give me a couple chickens. I don't know, right? It would depend on the infraction. I hate using that word. It would depend on how bad the accident was, or the violation of someone else's person, places, or things would be.
Do you think in an anarchist society people would drive like armored vehicles, so like if somebody bumps into you it's not such a big deal? Or would cars be designed so that they're harder to damage?
What I can say is I think I think a lot of the government regulations that we put on companies reduce their ability to innovate. You look at like Saturn. Remember that car company?
Yeah.
Where you could like whack the side doors with a sledgehammer and it didn't do anything?
Oh yeah, weren't they made out of plastic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were still safe. Rated safe. So I think, you probably have some innovation. You probably have some people that would want to drive armored cars. Heck, I might own one, but I don't know. Who knows? Some might choose to just go back to riding horses. And, people that are more focused on the environment might say, you know what? I live, close enough to a store that I can ride my horse there and pick up what I need and come back. So I think you'd have a wide range of what people would want to do. But you would open up a system that would encourage innovation, and it would encourage competition, because there wouldn't be any IP either, right? So if you made something nifty and it was yours, it would probably end up being copied. Is that fair? Sure, why not? Make yours better.
Yeah, I guess under an anarchist system, you probably wouldn't have the cartelization of so many businesses that we have now. You wouldn't have, like,
Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon, they wouldn't exist. They exist solely because of government regulation, not despite it. It's 100% true. You would have a lot more small businesses. You would have a lot more Main Street than what you have today.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, there were coffee shops all over the place. Little coffee shops that supported families, hardware stores, all kinds of businesses that now don't really exist or are very rare. Mm-hmm. And those entire businesses have been taken over by one or two companies.
Yep. Government subsidizes them, gives them massive tax credits. Obviously uses wage law to dictate that everyone else has to be at the same level, regardless of skill. It's a very anti-competitive thing, the way the government operates, right? All while telling people straight to their face, with a straight face, that this is for your protection. It's not. Minimum wage laws alone probably killed more small businesses than anything else, and hurt the people they're meant to help, right? You raise, the current talk track, right? Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Well, someone in North Dakota is going to be sitting there with their $250 a month rent for their house, and they're going to be going to their job, and all of a sudden they're going to end up making double what they made. Their tax bracket's going to go up. They're going to end up taking home probably close to the same that they were in the first place. And the next piece is, when I'm a business owner and you force me to pay that much for something like flipping a hamburger, I'm not going to take the guy that's fresh out of school, the gal that's fresh out of school. I'm going to take someone that's had experience flipping hamburgers, that has worked in the industry, and has done so for a while, because I don't have to put as much effort and time and money into training them. So now these fresh out of school people, where are they going to go? I'm not going to look for the guy that is brand new, has never held a job, doesn't know what the heck to do. I'm going to look for the person that knows, that understands the system, that knows how to do the things that I need done. I will be looking for higher skilled labor at that point.
So basically, they're eliminating a lot of entry-level positions.
Yeah. Well, they're eliminating the opportunity for people that are coming in at entry level. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like that also leads to small businesses just going out of business, and you get the bigger companies coming in that can afford to automate a lot of things, and they buy these robots that you don't have to pay minimum wage to, and take over even more of the business.
Oh, absolutely, right? Not to mention the small businesses don't get those. Yeah, out here, right? Amazon was coming out. The government almost gave them the land, right? And then gave them massive tax subsidies and incentives to come out here. So it was almost like we paid them to come here. And at the same time, you've got Joe Mom and Pop Shop. Nobody's doing anything for them. So they have to put up their home and everything else for collateral. And if you come in and they're paying their workers, say, $10 an hour, and you all of a sudden say, okay, you're going to go to 15, they're going to have to raise their prices, and they won't compete with Amazon. So, yeah, it's a natural thing, right? You're essentially driving those small businesses out of business.
Let's talk a little bit about the garden that we're setting up. You've set aside about an acre for us to work with, and we've been here for a couple of weekends working on it. You helped us extend the electric fence around it and till it and work some compost and stuff into the soil. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about why you're doing that and what your hopes and dreams are for this little garden that we're setting up and for the community that's growing up around it?
Well, why am I doing that? We have the area, and a lot of people don't, right? Most people, I think, are not in a position where they have land like that to be able to grow a large variety, which limits their options. It doesn't make it not possible, but it limits it. So this is something that we can do. It doesn't cost us anything. We had all the supplies. It's just about doing some of the labor and then planting and then tending and harvesting. And what it allows us to do is help the people in our freedom cell. This is the whole thing about anarchists. We want to help people. There's no bombs and guns and violence, and I just as soon say, hey, let's set up a community garden instead, right? That's more activism for me, right? I know that the group didn't, once I found Freedom Cells and joined Freedom Cells, when we started talking and then the rest of us started meeting, and there wasn't, nobody had land available to be able to set aside quite as much land so that we could grow food. And this is something that we can share with the entire Freedom Cell, and everyone can have fresh produce and not have to go to the store. We know what the inputs to that produce are. We're making the land better as we're doing it, and as we continue to do that, it will produce even more for us with less work from us, right? And so it's my way of giving to the Freedom Cells organization, and at the same time, it's Freedom Cells helping us, right? We all benefit from this, and it's just land that we own, and it's not doing anything. It's just a bunch of grass and weeds and stuff like that, and so we're turning it into something we can use. Why did I do it? I don't know. I guess I try and be a good person and help other people. I think too many people in this world have this view of their fellow man as being the enemy. And I think there's a lot more good in this world and a lot more good people that do want to help others. And if you gave them the ability to, they would. I think, yeah. So what's my desire for that? My desire for that is a couple-fold. Again, the Freedom Cells group, to be able to have sustainable food that they're not going and buying, so it wasn't traveling from Mexico or California all the way across the country, or from China or these other places, but to have your food where it's grown by you on fairly local land to you, and reduce that input. And the other is in the unlikely but certainly could happen situation where there needed to be a safe space for the Freedom Cell. We've got the land, we will have been set up, and there's food sources. So we've got that, we've got our chickens, which produce more eggs than we know what to do with. We've got, goats. We're probably going to do turkeys next year, again. So there's food. And so it's just about that. Yeah.
So it's kind of like people helping each other. We're helping you set up the garden, you're helping us learn how to grow food.
Yeah.
And it's good for everybody.
It is, and it'll be a consistent source of food for this group, which is amazing. Heck, we might even be able to get to a place where, maybe a couple of people in the group can make that their full-time gig by selling at farmers markets. Who knows? I don't know. There's no limit to where we can take this, right? There's more land, we can expand it, so nothing to say you couldn't.
Yeah, I've been buying food at the farmers market since I moved here to Charlotte. We have a really good farmers market in Charlotte, and I hardly ever go to the grocery store anymore, and it's made a big difference in my life. I enjoy my food a lot more, and I feel better, and I think that growing the food myself and eating it even fresher will just make it that much better.
It will. And at least for me, and maybe some of it's because I'm putting in the labor, I don't think so, because I've heard the same as well. The herbs, the vegetables, etc. that we grow, as well as the meat and even the eggs, all of it tastes better. It tastes richer. It's more like, Joel Salatin always says, you have to respect the pigness of the pig, or the chickenness of the chicken. The same goes true with vegetables, And we were kind of talking about this, right, with watering mechanisms. The vegetables know what they need, right? Respect them. Let them do what they naturally are capable of doing. And so the food is better. I believe it's healthier for you. There's no need to coat it in wax to ship it off. We don't have to use pesticides. We will suffer some loss because we don't. That's part of it. But the good news is that loss also gets translated back into food. The chickens get it.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the knowledge that people used to have has been almost lost. I think 100 years ago, I think almost everybody knew how to grow food, and now hardly anybody does. So I think it's really valuable that you're kind of spreading this knowledge and helping more people to learn how to grow food for themselves. And there's something about growing food. I noticed it today when we were pulling weeds and just putting your hands into the dirt. There's something about it. It's a really good feeling.
It is. Dirt is awesome. It's the smell of it, the feel of it, even the dirt under your nails. Pretty bad. I'll wash up before dinner. Is amazing. Yeah, and the food things almost become. It's almost as though the system is trying to keep us from growing food. And when you start to see laws being enacted that make it illegal to do things like have front yard gardens, to do things like collect your own rainwater to water your vegetables, You start to wonder, is it just that they aren't teaching that anymore, or are they actively trying to discourage it?
Yeah, sometimes it does seem like they're trying to create a system where people are more and more dependent on the system and less able to get by without it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and it's an amazing feeling to play in the dirt, as I call it. It's work. It's not easy, right? At least, especially with what we did, where we had an established field or pasture kind of place that had really significant root structure. To get that, foliage out of there, and then to till up the dirt and drop compost and everything else. But I keep, when we're doing it every time, I like to dig my hand in and feel, and it's getting better and better every time, and I think next year it's going to be amazing. I think we'll all be impressed with the soil quality out there next year. And it's a wonderful thing. It connects you back to the earth, connects you to nature, it connects you back to your food. We're all interconnected, I really, really believe that.
What was it like for you moving here from the city and having to learn all that? How did it work? Did you read books, or did people come out and help you, or how did you figure it out?
Unfortunately, and I think this is, you hear this from more people than you should, but it's the truth. We did a lot of our learning through failure. I lived on the farm, so I had some knowledge about certain things, right? Animal husbandry, fencing, and things of this nature, and about growing and doing stuff like this. But, there's a lot of things that I didn't know because I wasn't there to learn. I was there because I had to be, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So a vast amount of our knowledge and the tips and the things that help just came from failing so miserably that we had to figure out how to do it right, which is unfortunate, but it's a common story with people that like the homesteaders and the people that try and go off the grid and everything else. Too little research and too much do with no knowledge of what the heck you're trying to do. It's a difficult thing to do.
So a lot of it was just trial and error, just try something, it doesn't work, and then you do research and figure out a better way?
It was, yeah. Even when it comes to building like runs for chickens to keep the predators out. Little teeny things that we ended up not doing in the first place, and then finding out from other people, well, this is why you're getting predators, and well, that makes sense. Well, how do you fix it? And so they tell us. A lot of it was, interaction with people that are local, trying to find people to sell as goats, trying to find people that raised other animals that maybe we could trade with, things of that nature, and developing, relationships with those people, and asking questions. And I think it's a really important thing. I think we all get affected by this to some degree, is our ego won't allow us to show that we don't know, and that we maybe are wrong. And obviously that's varying degrees, right? So a little bit of it is letting go of personal pride and ego and asking for help. Like, how do I do this? Yeah. I also, started, and now I am just, I really enjoy homesteaders that are local in my region. Not to say I don't watch others, but if they're in my agricultural region, it's better for me. The climate is similar enough to where the way they do things with animals, with compost, with vegetables, with fruit, etc., is going to be very similar, if not identical, to the way I do it. Right?
When you say homesteaders, you mean people that are doing basically what you're doing, growing food and raising animals, trying to live off the land?
Absolutely. People that are trying to get away from buying what they need to consume to live, and get to a place where they are consuming their own. The general theory with homesteaders also is not just this self-resilience or self-sustainability. Is is that they all try to do things in such a way that they're giving back, so they're not taking, right? Like we were talking about monocultures, right? Anytime you have a monoculture, you're taking. You're constantly taking, because there's no diversity. So you've got to feed one thing, and it needs this type of infrastructure, whatever, fertilizer, soil, etc. Nothing else wants to grow there, right? And the same thing goes for homesteaders. They're like, we don't want to do that because we're just damaging. We're killing what is giving to us, what is being so generous to us, right?
So with the monoculture, you're kind of depleting the soil that you're growing in, and also you have runoff going off that's poisonous, that's poisoning the surrounding areas.
Yep.
And with the kind of agriculture that you're doing, it's more of kind of nurturing the land, making it better, and maybe even making the surrounding areas better.
I honestly believe that it does, right? I mean, soil, like the box we drew around our little area, right? That soil will leach into the surrounding areas. The nutrients in it will. It will give back. We will compost anything that we pull out of the garden that isn't eaten, if it's not given to chickens as to reduce their input. We'll compost it, and then that compost goes back into feeding the soil, which will leach into the ground, which feeds the surrounding areas, right? The trees that are near that should be able to, from their roots, take up some of the nutrients in the soil we're creating, in the land that we're creating. We're making the ground better for not just that, but for the earthworms and for all of the things out here, and hopefully we're planting things that will encourage pollinators to come, and of course we all need more of those, right? So
yeah, composting seems like a wonderful thing. In the city you buy food and you throw the leftovers in the garbage, and it's hauled off to some dump that smells terrible, and it's a blight on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that you can just take that stuff and turn it into dirt, and into really good dirt, to grow more food that doesn't even, and it's amazing that after it composts, it doesn't even smell bad.
Yep.
It just smells like dirt. It's almost like magic.
It is. It's the magic of microbes. It really is. It's a beautiful thing.
And just growing seeds, we've been planting seedlings for the last few weeks to get ready for the garden, and planting all these little seeds, these little tiny seeds, and then seeing them sprout a little tiny green thing, and it gets bigger and bigger, and that it's going to turn into a plant that a bunch of food comes out of. It's like magic.
It is. It makes you smile, doesn't it? It does me. When I saw the pictures you had posted from your trays, I was like, ooh, that's awesome. It is. And it feels good. I don't know how to explain it, but it feels good. It feels happy. That's all I can say. I don't know how to describe it. It feels good. It's kind of like feeling, if you haven't done this in a while, go outside, dig up some dirt, and put your hands in it, feel your dirt, just do it, plant something. Sorry.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because it was so exciting when I saw them starting to sprout, and then when they got bigger, it's just like, I don't know, it feels so good to just know that you planted something and to see it grow.
It does. It really does. You know, and like you said, it came from this tiny little thing. This tiny little thing, you know. I mean, a watermelon plant, we could probably grow maybe 3 on this entire porch. We're all familiar with what a watermelon seed looks like. This whole porch would be covered in plant from those 3 tiny little seeds. It's an amazing thing, you know. And it is. You're right. It's almost like magic. It's like, you know, this tiny little thing grew into, you know, it's amazing.
Oh, the magic of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that might be a good note to end on, unless you have some final thoughts that you want to share with the audience.
You know, I think we've covered quite a lot. I guess for me, you know, going back to what I said, go find some dirt, dig, plant something, plant a tomato plant. Even if you only have a balcony, you can use a 5-gallon bucket, and you could take your favorite vegetable, whatever it is, put it in a 5-gallon bucket and grow it on your balcony, and eat that fruit. You know, go research it and learn how to grow this food, and then eat that food. And I challenge you to say that it's not as good as what you get in the store. I would challenge you to do that. I think everyone should. And if you have a community, or you live in a community where you can own some chickens, grab a couple of hens. Fresh eggs they make store-bought eggs taste horrible, is all I can say. And they're easy, and they help tend your garden too. So I think, you know, just get out there, grow something, be a part of this rock we live on, you know, be a part of the nature around you, and find your community, find your Alberts, find your people, and nourish those relationships.
Well, thank you, Doug. It was great talking with you, and I really appreciate you being on my show.
My pleasure. I'm very happy you had me on.
Come out in your millions.